My name is Faith, I'm 31 years old, and last Saturday night changed everything between me and my family. For years, they called me the poor cousin at family gatherings, making jokes about my thrift store clothes and tiny apartment while they flaunted their designer bags and luxury cars. At my cousin Brandon's birthday dinner at the most expensive restaurant in town, they took it too far. When the bill came and everyone conveniently disappeared to the restroom, leaving me with the check, they had no idea what was about to happen. What they didn't know is that 6 months ago, my life had completely changed. And when I casually paid that $4,800 bill with a single transfer, their faces were priceless. Before we dive into this story, drop a comment about where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button to join our community. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this unfolds. Growing up, I was always the odd one out in my family. My parents, Robert and Michelle, were high school teachers who valued education and integrity over material wealth. We lived comfortably but modestly in a 3-bedroom ranch house in the suburbs. My extended family was a different story entirely. My mother's sister, Aunt Patricia, had married well. Her husband, Uncle Richard, owned a chain of car dealerships across 3 states. They lived in a sprawling estate with an Olympic-sized pool and a 4-car garage filled with luxury vehicles. Their son, Brandon, was 2 years younger than me. From the time we were children, the comparisons were constant. While I wore hand-me-downs and clothes from discount stores, Brandon wore designer labels. When I got my first car at 16, a reliable but old Honda Civic that my dad helped me buy, Brandon received a brand new BMW for his 14th birthday. Yes, 14. The family gatherings were the worst. Every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every birthday became an opportunity for subtle and not-so-subtle reminders of the economic divide. Aunt Patricia would ask my mother about sales at department stores, feigning concern about whether we could afford new clothes. Uncle Richard would offer my father unsolicited advice about investments and wealth building, as if my dad hadn't thought about his financial future. But the person who made me feel the smallest was my cousin Melissa. She was Uncle Richard's niece from his side of the family, just 6 months younger than me, and she had perfected the art of the backhanded compliment. "Oh, Faith, that's such a cute dress," she would say at family events, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "It's so brave of you to wear something so vintage. I could never pull off that thrift store look." Or she would talk loudly about her latest shopping sprees on Rodeo Drive, making sure everyone within earshot knew she had just spent more on a handbag than I paid for rent. I tried not to let it bother me. My parents had taught me that character mattered more than possessions, that self-worth came from within, not from designer labels. But when you're young and constantly being compared to cousins who seem to have everything you don't, it's hard not to feel inadequate. I graduated high school with a 4.0 GPA and a full scholarship to the state university. It was a huge accomplishment, but at the family celebration dinner, all anyone could talk about was Brandon getting into a private college. Never mind that his admission was facilitated by a generous donation from his father. I majored in computer science with a minor in mathematics. It wasn't the glamorous choice. My cousins were studying fashion design and business management at expensive private schools, but I loved the logic and problem-solving aspects of programming. College was tough. While my scholarship covered tuition, I still needed money for books, rent, and living expenses. I worked 3 part-time jobs. Nights at a campus coffee shop, weekends doing tech support for local businesses, and freelance web development whenever I could find clients. At family gatherings during my college years, the jokes about my financial situation intensified. Melissa would ask me if I was still slumming it in student housing. Brandon would talk about his study abroad trips to Europe and Asia, casually mentioning that his parents had rented him a villa in Tuscany for the summer. "Faith, are you still fixing computers for people?" Aunt Patricia asked at one Thanksgiving, her tone suggesting I was doing something vaguely embarrassing. "That's so sweet that you're so practical." My mother would squeeze my hand under the table, a silent reminder to stay calm, to not let them get to me. My father would change the subject, steering conversations toward safer topics. But the damage was done. Each comment, each comparison, each reminder of our different economic realities chipped away at my confidence. After graduation, I got a job as a junior software developer at a mid-sized tech company. The salary was decent, $45,000 a year, enough to rent a small one-bedroom apartment and pay my bills. I was proud of my independence, excited to be supporting myself completely. The family, however, was less impressed. Only $45,000? I overheard Uncle Richard say to my father at a family barbecue, "Brandon's starting salary at my dealership is $75,000, and that's just his base. With bonuses, he'll clear 6 figures his first year." I learned to dread family gatherings. Each one was a reminder of how I didn't measure up, how my accomplishments were somehow less impressive because they didn't come with a big paycheck or prestigious title. 3 years into my career as a software developer, I was comfortable but not wealthy. I had a small emergency fund, no debt thanks to my scholarship and frugal living, but nothing that would impress my family. Then I met Marcus at a tech conference. He was a venture capitalist looking for promising startups to invest in, and we struck up a conversation about emerging technologies and market opportunities. "You clearly understand this space," he said after an hour of conversation. "Have you ever thought about starting your own company?" The truth was I had. For 2 years, I had been developing a software platform in my spare time. It was a tool designed to help small businesses manage their inventory, customer relationships, and finances in one integrated system. The existing solutions were either too expensive for small businesses or too complicated for non-technical owners. My platform was different. It was affordable, intuitive, and specifically designed for businesses with limited resources and technical expertise. I had been testing it with a few local business owners, refining the features based on their feedback. Marcus asked to see a demo. The following week, I showed him what I had built. He was impressed, so impressed that he offered to connect me with potential investors. 6 months later, after countless pitch meetings and negotiations, I had secured $2 million in seed funding. I quit my job, hired a small team of developers, and launched my company, SimplifyBiz. The first year was brutal. We worked insane hours, faced technical challenges I hadn't anticipated, and nearly ran out of money twice. I didn't tell my family what I was doing. I knew they wouldn't understand, and I couldn't bear the thought of their judgment if I failed. During that year, I missed several family gatherings, citing work commitments. When I did attend, I wore the same modest clothes, drove the same old Civic, and lived in the same small apartment. Nothing about my external life had changed, so my family's treatment of me remained the same. Still coding away at that little company? Melissa asked at Christmas, not even bothering to remember my company's name. "That's so cute. Brandon just got promoted to Senior Vice President. He's only 26. I smiled and nodded, saying nothing about the fact that SimplifyBiz had just signed its 100th client or that our monthly recurring revenue had hit $50,000. By the end of year 2, SimplifyBiz had grown beyond my wildest dreams. We had 500 clients, 20 employees, and revenue projections that made me dizzy. More importantly, we were solving real problems for real businesses. I received emails weekly from small business owners thanking me for creating a tool that had transformed how they operated. Then came the acquisition offer. A major software company wanted to buy SimplifyBiz. The offer was substantial, $25 million. After negotiations, investor payouts, and taxes, my take-home would be approximately $12 million. I was 30 years old, and suddenly I was wealthy beyond anything I had imagined. After the acquisition closed, I made a deliberate choice to keep my new financial status private. I had watched enough wealthy people in my life, like Aunt Patricia and Uncle Richard, to know that money changed relationships. I didn't want my family treating me differently because of my bank account. I wanted to know who truly valued me for who I was. So I maintained my modest lifestyle. I continued living in my small apartment, though I did quietly pay off the remaining years on the lease and secured a permanent residency agreement. I kept driving my old Civic, though I had it meticulously serviced and upgraded with better safety features. I still shopped at the same stores, ate at the same restaurants, and lived the same simple life I always had. The only visible change was that I quit my day job and told my family I was doing freelance consulting. This explanation satisfied their curiosity without revealing the truth. With my cousin Brandon's 30th birthday approaching, the family was planning something big. Aunt Patricia had booked a private room at Azure, the most expensive restaurant in the city. She made sure everyone knew that dinner would be upscale and that we should dress appropriately. 2 weeks before the dinner, I received a call from Melissa. "Hey, Faith," she began, her voice syrupy sweet. "So, about Brandon's birthday dinner. I know Azure is pretty pricey, and I just wanted to give you a heads up that the per-person cost will probably be around $200, not including drinks. I totally understand if that's outside your budget. No one would judge you for skipping it." The implication was clear. I couldn't afford it, and they expected me either to embarrass myself trying or to not show up at all. "Thanks for the heads up," I said calmly. "I'll be there." There was a pause. "Oh, okay, great. Just wanted to make sure you knew what you were getting into." As the dinner approached, I debated whether to finally reveal my financial situation. Part of me wanted to maintain my privacy, to continue living life on my own terms. But another part, the part that had endured years of condescension and judgment, wanted them to understand that their assumptions about me had always been wrong. I decided to attend the dinner and see how things played out. If my family continued treating me with respect despite thinking I was poor, then maybe the relationship could be salvaged. But if they used this expensive dinner as another opportunity to belittle me, well, I had a surprise in store. Saturday evening arrived, and I dressed carefully for the occasion. I chose a simple black dress that I had purchased years ago, elegant but understated. I wore minimal jewelry, just the pearl earrings my grandmother had given me before she passed away. My hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and my makeup was natural. As I drove to Azure in my old Civic, I felt surprisingly calm. Whatever happened tonight, I would handle it with grace. The restaurant was as opulent as I had heard. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city skyline, crystal chandeliers cast warm light across pristine white tablecloths, and well-dressed servers moved efficiently between tables. I arrived exactly on time and was directed to the private dining room Aunt Patricia had reserved. The room was stunning, with its own chandelier, a long table set for 14, and windows that offered a panoramic view of the city at dusk. My family was already there. Brandon held court at the head of the table, wearing what looked like a custom-tailored suit. Melissa wore a designer dress I recognized from a recent fashion magazine, the price tag memorable because it cost more than most people's monthly rent. "Faith," my mother called out, waving me over. She and my father were seated near the middle of the table. I could see the tension in their shoulders, the forced smiles that suggested they too were bracing for an uncomfortable evening. I hugged my parents and wished Brandon a happy birthday, handing him a thoughtfully chosen gift, a first edition of his favorite novel that I had tracked down through a rare book dealer. "Oh, how quaint," Aunt Patricia said, eyeing the wrapped book with barely concealed disappointment. I could tell she had been expecting something more expensive, more showy. Melissa air-kissed my cheeks, her perfume overwhelming. "Faith, you look nice. Is that dress from a few years ago? I think I remember seeing you wear it before." There's nothing wrong with re-wearing clothes, obviously. It's very sustainable. "Thanks," I said, refusing to take the bait. "You look lovely too." As we took our seats, I noticed the carefully orchestrated seating arrangement. Brandon was at the head of the table, flanked by his parents. Melissa sat nearby, along with other cousins and family members who fit comfortably into the wealthy category. My parents and I were seated at the far end of the table, physically separated from the main action. The message was clear. We were there, but we weren't really part of the inner circle. As drinks were ordered, the familiar patterns emerged. Uncle Richard ordered a bottle of wine that cost $400, making sure to explain to the sommelier exactly what vintage he wanted and why. Aunt Patricia discussed her recent trip to the French Riviera in exhaustive detail, name-dropping exclusive resorts and Michelin-starred restaurants. Brandon talked about the new Porsche he had just purchased, his fifth car, and Melissa showed off her engagement ring, a diamond so large it seemed almost comical. "Faith, what are you drinking?" Brandon asked, noticing I had ordered a glass of water. "Just water for now," I replied. "Oh, saving money, are we?" Melissa interjected with a knowing smile. "That's so smart. These drinks are ridiculously overpriced. I mean, who pays $15 for a cocktail?" The irony of her saying this while wearing a dress that cost $5,000 was not lost on me. As appetizers arrived, shrimp cocktail, oysters, foie gras, the conversation turned to recent purchases and luxury experiences. It felt less like a birthday dinner and more like a competition to see who could flaunt their wealth most impressively. "Faith, honey," Aunt Patricia said, her voice dripping with false concern, "how's your consulting work going? Are you getting enough clients? I worry about you, trying to make it on your own like that." "It's going well," I said simply. "I'm keeping busy." "That's wonderful," she replied, though her tone suggested she didn't believe me. "You know, if you ever need help, Uncle Richard has connections in the business world. Maybe he could help you find something more stable." My father's hand tightened around his fork, a sign of his rising frustration. My mother placed a calming hand on his arm. "I'm fine, really," I said. "But thank you for the offer." Melissa leaned across the table, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "You know, Faith, I have to say, I really admire your commitment to living simply. Not everyone can be satisfied with a modest lifestyle. Some of us," she gestured to herself and the others, "we need certain comforts. But you've always been so content with less. It's actually kind of inspiring." The backhanded compliment hung in the air. Several family members shifted uncomfortably, recognizing the insult for what it was. But no one said anything. They never did. As the main courses were served, filet mignon, lobster, exotic preparations that were more art than food, the comments continued. Each one was a small cut, individually minor but collectively devastating. "Faith, you're getting the salmon?" Brandon observed. "That's the least expensive thing on the menu." "Good choice. Remember when Faith used to shop at thrift stores?" Melissa said to another cousin, loudly enough for me to hear. "Actually, she probably still does." Nothing wrong with that, of course. Uncle Richard offered to help me out by paying for my meal, as if I were a charity case in need of assistance. Through it all, I remained calm, answering questions politely, refusing to show how their words affected me. But inside, I was making a decision. Tonight would be the night they learned the truth, but not in the way I had originally planned. As dessert was being cleared away and coffee was served, the server appeared with the check. He placed it in a leather folder on the table near Brandon, the guest of honor. Everyone studiously avoided looking at the bill. This was the moment I had been anticipating all evening, the moment when the reality of this expensive dinner would come due. Brandon picked up the folder, glanced at the total, and his eyes widened slightly. Even he, with all his wealth, was taken aback by the amount. The bill was $4,847.32, including tax and tip. "Well," he said, laughing uncomfortably, "Azure doesn't disappoint on price, that's for sure." He looked around the table, clearly expecting others to offer to split the cost. This was, after all, supposed to be a family celebration, with costs presumably shared. But one by one, my relatives suddenly became very interested in other things. Aunt Patricia excused herself to the restroom. Uncle Richard took an important phone call. Melissa needed to check on something outside. Other cousins and family members found reasons to step away from the table. Within minutes, only 4 people remained seated: Brandon, my parents, and me. Brandon looked at my father. "Uncle Robert, would you want to split this?" My father, who I knew had carefully budgeted to afford his share of what he thought would be a split bill, started to reach for his wallet. The look of quiet resignation on his face broke my heart. I knew he and my mother would pay whatever they felt they owed, even if it meant financial stress for the next month. "Actually," I said, my voice calm and clear, "I'll take care of it." Everyone froze. Brandon stared at me. My parents looked confused. Even the server, who was standing nearby, seemed surprised. Faith, honey, you don't have to, my mother began. I know, I said, but I want to. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. With a few taps, I initiated a transfer to the restaurant's payment system. The transaction processed instantly. There, I said, showing the confirmation screen to the server. That should cover everything, including a 30% tip. The server's eyes widened as he looked at the screen. Thank you so much, ma'am. That's incredibly generous. Brandon was speechless, staring at me as if seeing me for the first time. My parents exchanged bewildered glances. At that moment, the rest of the family began trickling back to the table, having apparently decided that enough time had passed for the bill to be handled. All taken care of? Aunt Patricia asked brightly, assuming Brandon or someone else had paid. Yes, I said. I paid it. The silence that followed was profound. Aunt. Patricia's smile froze on her face. Melissa stopped mid-step, her mouth slightly open. Uncle Richard actually looked at his phone as if he could verify what I was saying through some digital means. You paid? Melissa finally managed. The whole bill? Yes. But that's almost $5,000, Brandon said, still processing. $4,847.32. To be exact, I confirmed. Including tip. The atmosphere in the room had completely changed. The smug superiority that had characterized the evening evaporated, replaced by confusion and growing realization that something didn't add up. Faith, Uncle Richard said, his tone different now, more careful. How exactly did you pay for this? From my bank account, I replied simply. The same way anyone pays for anything. But you're a freelance consultant, Aunt Patricia said, as if this explained why I shouldn't have that kind of money. You live in that small apartment, you drive that old car. Actually, I said, deciding it was finally time. I'm not just a freelance consultant. 2 years ago, I founded a software company called SimplifyBiz. Last year, it was acquired by a major corporation. The acquisition was finalized 6 months ago. The silence deepened. I could see people trying to do mental calculations, trying to understand what this meant. Melissa found her voice first. Acquired? Like, they bought your company. Yes. For how much? The question came from Brandon, blunt and direct. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to keep the exact figure private. But another part, the part that had endured years of their judgment, wanted them to understand exactly how wrong their assumptions had been. $25 million, I said quietly. After taxes and investor payouts, I netted approximately $12 million. The reactions were varied and immediate. Aunt Patricia gasped audibly. Uncle Richard's face went through several expressions, settling on something between disbelief and grudging respect. Melissa looked like she had been slapped, her carefully composed features crumbling. Brandon, to his credit, started laughing. You've been a multimillionaire for 6 months, and you've been letting us treat you like you're broke? I wasn't letting you do anything, I corrected him. You made assumptions about me based on my lifestyle choices. I didn't see any reason to correct those assumptions. But why? My mother asked the question gently, trying to understand. Why didn't you tell us? I looked around the table at the faces of my family members, some confused, some embarrassed, some defensive. Because I wanted to see if anyone valued me for who I am, not for what I have. For years, you all treated me like I was less than because I had less money. Tonight was supposed to be a family celebration, but instead, it became another opportunity to remind me of my place in the family hierarchy. That's not fair, Aunt Patricia protested. We've always cared about you. Have you? I asked. Because from where I'm sitting, you've spent years making sure I knew I didn't measure up. The comments about my clothes, my car, my job. The comparisons to Brandon and Melissa. The assumption that I needed to be helped or pitted or educated about how to be more successful. My father reached for my hand, squeezing it supportively. My mother had tears in her eyes, not because she was sad, but because she was proud. I didn't tell you about my success because I wanted to live my life on my own terms, I continued. I don't need a mansion or a sports car or designer clothes to feel valuable. I built a company that helps people. I solved problems. I created jobs. That's what matters to me. But you let us believe you were struggling, Melissa said, her voice small. I never said I was struggling. You assumed that because I lived modestly. There's a difference. The reality was settling in now. All those jokes, all those condescending comments, all that superiority, it had been directed at someone who was wealthier than any of them. The dinner ended awkwardly after that, with people making excuses to leave early. Brandon, surprisingly, pulled me aside before I left. That was brutal, he said, though he was smiling. But honestly, we deserved it. I'm sorry for how I treated you. I think I just got so caught up in the competition, in proving myself, that I never stopped to think about what I was actually competing for. I accept your apology, I said. And for what it's worth, I hope we can build a better relationship going forward. One based on who we are, not what we have. He nodded, looking thoughtful. I'd like that. My parents were quiet on the drive home, processing everything. Finally, my mother spoke. I'm proud of you, she said. Not because of the money, but because you stayed true to yourself. You could have used your wealth to prove something, to put them in their place. Instead, you lived your values. Your mother's right, my dad added. You showed more character in your restraint than most people show in a lifetime. In the weeks that followed, my relationship with my extended family shifted dramatically. Aunt Patricia called to apologize, though her apology was more about being embarrassed than actually understanding what she had done wrong. Uncle Richard offered to help me invest my money, an offer I politely declined. Melissa sent a long text message explaining that she had always been insecure around me, that my intelligence and independence had intimidated her, and that her cruelty had been a defense mechanism. It was more honest than I expected, and we've been slowly rebuilding a friendship on more equal footing. The most significant change has been in how I see myself. For years, I had internalized their messages, believing on some level that my worth was tied to my bank account. Paying that bill wasn't about proving I had money. It was about proving to myself that their opinions of me had never mattered. I still live in a modest apartment, still drive my old Civic, still shop at the same stores. But now, it's a choice I make consciously, not a circumstance I'm trapped in. I invest heavily in causes I care about, support small businesses, and help fund scholarships for students pursuing computer science degrees. Money didn't change who I am. It just revealed who everyone else was. If there's one lesson from this experience, it's this. Never judge someone's worth by their possessions. You never know what someone has overcome, what they've built, or what they're capable of. And maybe, more importantly, true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in character, integrity, and how we treat others when we think they have nothing we need. Have you ever been underestimated by people who thought they knew your story? How did you handle it? Share your experiences in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe if this story resonated with you. Remember, the most successful revenge isn't about proving others wrong, it's about proving yourself right. Thanks for watching.